Every football fan knows the sound, the heart-stopping clank off the upright that can ruin a season or make a miracle. We call it the doink today, but where did that word actually come from? Joining us is Timothy B. Brown of FootballArchaeology.com, and he's tracing the doink back to a legendary John Madden broadcast in 1986 and uncovering the 1870s era of the poster, where hitting the goalpost meant the kick didn't count at all. Grab your helmets, we're diving into the history of football's most maddening sound. Tim, welcome to Pigskin Dispatch.
Hey, Darren, thanks for inviting me once again. And we're sitting here. We're going to talk about football's first doinks, and kind of just want to know if you remember your first doink.
I don't know if that's any of your business, there, big fella.
Well, I meant kicking the ball and hitting a
okay.
goalpost.
Okay, all right.
Oh, all right. Your mind is terrible. I'm
not even going to tell you where my mind went.
I asked an innocent question, and you just went.
I don't even know where my mind went. So it went long ago, that's for sure. All right. Well, Tim's alluding to a recent tidbit that he wrote that's called Football's First Doinks and Poster. So, Tim, it's an interesting story, and maybe you can explain it to us.
Sure. So this, lately I've been doing a bunch of these kind of multi-level stories, right? I mean, just different things that kind of hopefully come together. But so this one is about kind of the origin of the word doink as used in football today. And, actually I should say origins of the word doink before it was applied to football, then when it was first applied to football. And then the third thing is, what did we call doinks before we called them doinks? So that's kind of the gist of the tidbit. And so, when I go back and research the word doink in newspaper archives anyways, most of the time, the early doinks appear to just be typos. It's like somebody, at the time, there was somebody physically typing or setting the type, right? I mean, they had to manually put in all the letters. And so doink was oftentimes a misprint or a typo, misset of a word like drink or doing. And so anyways, so we had doinks, but they
damn autocorrect back in the day.
No, not in the types, not when they were using those little lead, pieces of type. But it would have been handy if they had.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So then doink, sometime maybe the 1930s or so, then it kind of doink appears more often. And a lot of times it was in like cartoons where they're trying to use they're trying to make somebody who's like German or Eastern European, they're trying to apply their accent in a cartoon. And so the word doing, they typically had them pronounce it doink. Now, I've never really heard anybody pronounce it that way, but anyways, that's what they did. And then by the 1960s, doink meant it was a sound that came when one object hit another. And it tended to be like something hollow hitting or something hitting something hollow, but it was all over the board. But it wasn't a very popular word, throughout that whole time, it wasn't a real popular word. And then all of a sudden, John Madden, who was famous for using all kinds of, kind of bizarre expressions, right? He started using doink, but he used it oftentimes to describe a really solid block or tackle, like a really good massive hit. That was a doink. And so that was all fun, fine and good. But then in a 1986 playoff game, the Giants had a kicker named John Schubert, and he missed like 8 of 9 field goals in the playoffs. And one of them, he missed a 19-yarder, and it hit the uprights. And in the instant replay of that kick, Madden used the word doink to describe his kick hitting the upright. And then from that point on, doink just became a word that was commonly used to describe hitting the uprights or hitting the crossbar. And I think kind of what I like about it, and maybe I think part of the attraction of the word doink and just the concept of doinks is that, it just kind of reminds you that football, a game of football and a lot of sports are just filled with all these chance happenings, right? Mm-hmm. Does somebody slip? Does the ball barely pop out of somebody's hand? Does the helmet hit the ball and just right when making a tackle and a fumble ensues? So I mean, I just think there's, as much as football is this planned and regimented game, there's just a lot of little things that might have gone the other way, and doinks are one of them, because had the ball just gone a little bit left or right, or doinked and hit the crossbar and crossed over the or hit the upright and crossed over the crossbar, then it's a good doink, right? Instead of a bad doink. So anyway, so that's kind of our modern use of doink. And but I also wanted to look back and see, okay, well, what did we call doinks before we called them doinks? And I don't know that, for a lot of like the 20th century until Madden came along, I'm not sure we really had a term. But back in the day, like at really the origins of football, 1876, when the Intercollegiate Football Association first approved their rules, they basically almost verbatim adopted the rugby union rules of 1876. And rule number 5 dealt with, what constitutes a goal. And one of the things that rule says is that if the ball hits the crossbar or the goalpost, it's not good. And that event is called a poster. So that's why the title says, football's first doinks and posters. So early on.
So it wasn't good even if it passed through the plane.
Yeah. Okay. No matter what, if it hit the goalpost at all,
it was dead ball.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, actually, originally, I don't think it was a dead ball. It was still a live ball, really? But it just wasn't. It wasn't a goal. Whether this is a goal from field or goal after touchdown. So, anyway, so then I started looking. Okay, well, where did we? Could I find instances? I was searching for ball hits the crossbar, hits the upright, whatever. Hits the goalpost, and so actually it was. I found 5 instances, and then I just stopped. So 1876, Princeton, Columbia, which actually was played a week before the IFA approved those rules. They had a poster, right? So, but it was under rugby. They played it under rugby rules, but it wasn't kind of official. But still, it didn't count.
Now, could they have been talking about that rule then because it was so fresh in their minds from happening the week before?
Well, I think it was much more of a thing where, they only made 3 or 4 minor corrections to the rugby union rules.
Okay.
And they added 2 other rules, for American football. One is to have a referee, which, rugby union just had captains making the decisions on fouls. So they did things like that. But pretty much, I mean, it's literally, if there's, whatever, I'm making up a number, but if there's 2,000 words in the rugby union rules of the time, 1,950 of them are the same as the football rules. And a lot of the changes were just changes in wording, right? I mean, the Brits weren't that precise in their wording on some things. The Americans like to, nail it down a little bit more. But anyways, then there were, the first 4 posters that I could find all involved Columbia. And then, and it's 1879, 1880, 1881. So anyways, so it's just, the idea of, so they didn't call them doinks, but they called them posters. But the reality is we had posters before football was football, right? Because it was part of rugby, just like a lot of other things in the early part of the game. So doinks were posters, and then that term just kind of faded out. It left the rules. They did change it so that if the ball went over the crossbar, and I can't remember when that happened, but so somewhere along the line we lost the word poster, and we were left to Madden inventing the word doink, or at least applying the word doink.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until I read your article that Madden came up with it, because the first time I think I heard the word doink, of course, before, but maybe it was like, in the 60s when watching the old Adam West Batman things,
Yeah.
maybe that was one of the things that popped
Wham,
up.
bam.
Yeah, hit the penguin in the nose or something, maybe doink came up. But I think when it really became connected to me anyway with football was the double doink that the Chicago Bears kicker had. I believe it was a big game. I don't know if remember if it was a playoff game, or I think it was in the playoffs. He had the double doink where he hit the post and then the crossbar, and it bounced out, and they end up losing the game over it. But ever since then, it seems like it's been a lot more popular. But I didn't realize that Madden said it way back in 1986.
Yeah, I mean, all I can tell you, I'm basing that on, it doesn't appear in newspapers anyways until Madden says it.
It sounds like a Madden word, that's for sure.
Yeah. So anyways, he was good for something, and colorful language is one of them.
Yeah, definitely. He definitely made the game more interesting and really inspired a generation of broadcasters, I think, that still carries on to this day. You still see elements from others trying to emulate him. So yeah, great stuff. Great research. It always amazes me that you can go back in time and search all these words. I know there's search functions in newspapers.com and other different resources, but still to find something like the word doink, that's got to be that's amazing that you found that much.
Well, there's other words that I look for that I never find, and so then I don't do tidbits about them.
well, your research, you do some amazing things like that, and maybe you could share with folks how they could pay attention and appreciate what you're doing on your research.
Yeah, so I just publish a couple times a week on Substack. So my address is, or my URL is www.footballarchaeology.com. So just go there, check it out. And I've been having some technical challenges of late with it. Hopefully they're resolved by the time anybody listens to this podcast. But anyways, that's a way to find it, and just subscribe. And if you do, you'll get an email every time that I publish a new article with the article in the email. So
yeah, and folks, if you want to find more on this tidbit that Tim wrote about, just on your YouTube, just go down in the show notes here. We have the URL available for you. If you're listening on the podcast, go to the show notes on there, get you a link right to Tim's thing, and any images and his colorful literary storytelling is there as well, as long as his other, a billion and zillions of articles he has on footballarchaeology.com. And Tim, we really appreciate you coming on, talking about this again, and love to talk to you again next Tuesday.
Very good. Look forward to it.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff, for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.